this is Marla with Mad About Cards and Crafts, bringing you the Not Too Shabby Shop August Stamp and Die of the Month. It is called Picnic Cows. It has 4 very unconventional cannibalistic cows that are included in this stamp set. I'm going to give you a closer look right here. We have one that is eating corn and a shish kebab, another eating a hot dog, another eating watermelon, and then another one eating a hamburger. So yes, they are cannibalistic cows. Absolutely adorable. You can purchase the stamp alone, or you can purchase the stamp and die together. I have a piece of Bristol Smooth cardstock. I'm going to do some ink blending with some Stampin' Up! Ink. I struggled using Stampin' Up! Ink on Nina's Solar White cardstock, so today I do have the Bristol Smooth, which works much better. I am going to use this painter's tape. As you can see, I did put my cow where I thought I wanted him to be because I am going to do some strategic ink blending. I'm going to start by creating a little bit of grounding for my cow with the grass, and I'm using, I believe it's called lemon lime, and I'm going to use my blending brush to add a little bit of grass to that bottom. I wanted to share with you today how simple this card is to put together. It requires very little Copic coloring, but I'm adding a lot of details to this very simple scene that I'm building, and I think that it just helps step up your card a little bit. The Stamp and Die of the Month is available now in the Not Too Shabby Shop. You can purchase the stamp alone until it's sold out, or you can purchase the stamp and dies together, as I mentioned, but there's also a way to get a discount, and that is to go on auto ship. So if you select auto ship each month, you will receive, I believe it is a 16% discount on your order. Now I'm adding the sky, and I'm using an unconventional color. I'm using Flirty Flamingo, which is kind of a pinky peach. I am going to blend that over the top, and you can see just how much easier. I don't know if you saw my video a few weeks back, but it was a little bit blotchy. I really struggled trying to get a blend, but it worked very well with this Bristol Smooth. Now we're going to add the extra special pieces to this background that's really going to step it up. So I have this confetti stencil from Lawn Fawn. It's a 2-layer stencil. I am going to trim that card panel down by about 1 inch, so I'm not worried about the right side of the card panel as far as getting the stenciling. I'm coming in with a darker color with the first layer of the stencil, and I'm adding, I believe it's Watermelon Wonder. That is going to give a nice contrast, and when I'm finished with this stenciling, I'm going to bring in the second layer, and I struggle a little bit because I did use the middle of the stencil. I wanted to use an area of the stencil that had lots of confetti, so now I have to figure out how to line it up so I'm not overlapping any of the confetti that I've already added to this panel. So that's what's taking a little longer. If you wanted to use this stencil as a whole stencil, I could have put it in my MISTI and just lined up the corners, and it would have been perfect. So I'm adding a second layer of the Flirty Flamingo because it's going over the top of what I've already added ink to. It's going to give a more intense color, so it's not going to be too drastic like the Watermelon Wonder, but it's still going to be darker than what the sky was. On to our cow. I chose to use the cow with the watermelon for my card today. I'm going to stamp it using some VersaFine black onyx ink. I'm going to do some heat embossing with this, so once I stamp my image, I'll bring in some clear embossing powder. I'm going to add it over the top, and then I'll heat set it. I wanted to add some pattern to my cow. I wanted to make him spotted, and I started with a W5 marker, and what I'm doing is basically just mapping out the areas where I want the black to be. So my cow is going to be black and white. Once I get my shapes the way that I like them, I'm going to go around the edges of it with the W7, and then I'm going to blend it out again with the W5. I'm going to repeat this process throughout the cow. I do end up missing a spot, which I'll point out to you later. right there on the tummy. I didn't realize what that was. I wasn't sure whether it was another piece of fruit or whether it was a spot, and sure enough, it's a spot after asking Jamie which one it was. For the muzzle of the cow, I'm using some pink, so I'm starting with an R20. I'm going to blend in a little R21. I'm going around the watermelon and the outside of the face. I'm going to do the same thing for the tummy using that R20 and the R21, but I want more contrast, so now I have my R22. I'll add that contrast around the nostrils, around the outside of the face, around the watermelon, and I'll blend it out with the R21, and again with the R20, I'll add a little bit more of that contrast back in, and we'll move on to our watermelon. For the watermelon, I am adding an R2, I believe, and then I think I bring in an R8 and an R maybe 5, and I'm going to blend all these colors together, and I think that that's just the perfect shade for a watermelon. I'll color the rind initially with just one color, but you're going to see that I'm going to add a little bit more detail towards the end of this card. Once I finish with all of my coloring, I am going to cut it out with the coordinating dies. I did want to mention that the coordinating dies do cut out the sentiments. It's one of my favorite things about these die sets. I always love when sentiments are cut out. It makes my life so much easier rather than trying to find the right strip. And as for me, I am terrible at aligning things straight in my paper trimmer, so it is one of the benefits of the Stamp and Dies. I'm going to finish off coloring his hair, and I'm going to use some brown markers. I think that maybe they're E30 markers, to just add a little bit of contrast so that the cow's not so bland. And then here's where I'm going to add a little bit of highlight with my gel pen. So I always like to add details using my gel pen most of the time. There are times that I don't use it, but I think that it adds a lot of character to the critters. I tend to add dots and lines, so mostly I add one line and typically 3 dots, but I think that I changed it up because the image was just a little bit smaller. You could see that I went around the nose, I went across the watermelon and then the ears, and added some to the strawberries. And once I finish with that, I do let it dry for a few moments. You don't want to die cut this with the gel pen still wet, because what that's going to do is it's going to smear across your cow. So just give it either a quick shot with your heat tool, or just wait a couple moments. It doesn't take that long, and let it dry. So now we have our image all cut out, and we are ready to start assembling our card. I cut a piece of cardstock that I had in my stash. I thought it was perfect for this. It had the greens and the watermelon, and so I'm going to add this 1-inch strip to the left side of my card. As I mentioned, I was cutting down my card panel, so I cut 1 inch off of the panel, making it 3 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches. I'm going to align that with the strip of watermelon paper, and then I have a very small, maybe it's about an 1/8 inch strip of black cardstock, and I'm going to add that over the seam to make it just a nice seamless blend between the cardstock and my card panel. All right, so I need to add my sentiment, and it's here that I get a phone call. So I'm going to preface that with that information, because I'm going to stamp onto, I'm going to align it in my MISTI, and then I'm going to stamp onto a piece of cardstock just to make sure that I have it straight. And then I can also cut this out using the die later on if I choose to, but I wanted to just stamp directly onto my card panel. And it looks good. I'm using that Versamark ink, and then I'm going to stamp it 2 more times. I get a phone call, shut off my camera, and by the time I come back, I forgot to turn my camera on. But I did heat emboss this by adding that clear embossing powder over that Versamark ink or VersaFine ink. As I mentioned before, the VersaFine ink does stay wet because it is a pigment ink, and I was able to heat emboss that easily. As you can see, I added my cow where I wanted him, and now is where we're going to add the details to this background and just kind of ramp it up a little bit. I started by adding a YG, I think it's a 5 maybe. I did have the cap on the screen to add some dots to the grass so the grass wasn't so plain. And then I added the white gel pen, but unless you see the card in person, it didn't really show up very well in pictures and on camera, but I did add some dots to the grass. I'm adding details to the little confetti that we created using the Lawn Fawn stencil, and then I'm going to start adding some like plus signs. So I'm going to add plus signs, and then around each end of the plus sign I'm going to add a little bit of a dot. I'll add some dots into my background, and all of this adds more detail and more interest to the background. So instead of just the two colors floating along there, you have something that's more pleasing to the eye. I'm going to bring in this darker G, I think it's a G9 maybe, and I'm going to add some more contrast to the grass with some darker dots. And then it's at this point that I've realized that I want to color the rind of the watermelon. So I'm going to add some lighter lines, and then I'm going to bring in a darker marker, and I'm going to just add some contrasting lines, and then I'm going to go over it with the first marker that I used. I'll add a little bit of a highlight with that gel pen, and that's going to finish off my card for today. So I hope this gave you some ideas on how to step up your backgrounds and still create a clean and simple card. I want to thank you for joining me, and until next time, I hope you have a fabulous day.